planet Earth. Or as the rest of the Omniverse call it, the Orb of Dreamers.
What happens to our ideas once our minds have summoned them into existence?
One by one, they drift away to the cosmic imagisphere. From the atomic to the galactic, they dance and they whirl unfettered by worry and concern. If ever there was a masterpiece that could be enhanced by a single swish of a paintbrush, then you are that paintbrush. It's a boulevard of woken dreams, a reality built on fantasy. So join us, for you have always been and always will be most welcome in Little Big Planet. Come in and make yourself at home.
LittleBigPlanet is a physics-based 2.5D platformer for the PlayStation 3, PSP, PS Vita, and PS4. It is, without hyperbole, the most important game I've ever played. This game was responsible for a lot of things in my life, from the games I took interest in, to a love of creation that persists to this day, to the people I call my friends. So, why is it taking me so long to get here? Well, put simply, I wasn't ready. Over the last 4 years, there have been multiple instances where I wanted to make this video, but I never really felt like I was competent enough. Assuming this video isn't delayed, it should be published on the 15th anniversary of LittleBigPlanet as a franchise. I want to talk about how much every single installment means to me, and more crucially, how these are some very impressive games to be running on the PS3. Oh, and by the way, Sony is smelly, and recording most of these was a nightmare. I've had to use emulators and get footage from other YouTubers who I will credit. Alright, let's get started. What is LittleBigPlanet? Well, there's 100 video essays on how LittleBigPlanet came to be, so I won't go into much detail, but fundamentally, LittleBigPlanet was the first creation of Media Molecule, and is a physics-based 2.5D platformer with a heavy emphasis on UGC. There's a lot of big words there, but I trust that you can understand what they mean. At its core, LittleBigPlanet is a game about creating. And what setting would fit better for that than Craftworld? On the LittleBigPlanet, you're a little sack person. The 8 worlds of the story mode are equally as much fun platformer levels as they are elaborate demonstrations for what you could make. Each level was built to show off mechanics, keep you entertained with challenging platforming and puzzles, and give you the items they made the level with. This triple threat makes the levels incredibly replayable, as not only can you collect all the items in a level, but also ace it. Each level was designed to be hard enough not to be boring, but easy enough to still be fun. And while some levels would be better at one or the other, there's still a unique charm to finding that last prize bubble and hearing that sweet, sweet sound design. Nice. The worlds of story mode were all very charming. 8 worlds, 27 levels, 29 minigames, you had the gardens, a uniquely British environment with a king, a queen, Humpty Dumpty, ghosts, poisonous water, and Henry VIII. Every other world pulled from some existing culture too, from the African savannah featuring a meerkat strip club, feudal Japanese islands, Russian wilderness, American metropolis, Indian temples, or Mexico. Twice. Every theme is a whole different vibe, and it's a blast. My personal favourites are the islands and the gardens. The story itself is kind of weak, however. You're just kind of subject to the whims of the world around you until it becomes more clear you're trying to stop the Collector, a little cardboard guy who steals everyone else's creations and refuses to share them. You destroy his machines, and then he learns to share. There were supposed to be another 4 themes, but they weren't added, and we will forever mourn the loss of the Akihabara district. A visual spectacle, a blast from a gameplay perspective, and let's be real, nobody cares about the story in a platformer. But the story mode was just a pipeline to get you to the real meat of the game, create mode. Yes, I'll take so technically impressive I think someone sold their soul for 100. When you think of a create mode in a platformer, do you think of something like Mario Maker? A block-based, grid-based, basic system? Mario Maker is for chumps. Check this. Vertex-based objects. You can scale them, you can shrink them, you can cut them, and you can stick them. 3 playable layers, 4 mid layers in between those 3 layers, and a variety of tools, buttons, switches, tags, player sensors, pistons, winches, dissolvable materials, bombs, jetpack, magic mouths, creature brains, and so on and so forth, and so much more. Every single tool you saw used in the play mode is at your disposal, with the levels you play being built in this mode. This isn't like Portal 2, where the create mode is a watered down farce of an obtuse software. This is an easy to pick up mini-game of a create mode. While obviously a platformer is the easiest thing to make, there's a lot more than just platformers. But if you didn't want to contend with tag switches and sensors and all the strange logic, you could just make a simple level with simple jumps. Besides, you could always hide the lack of intricacy with stickers and decorations, which this game had in abundance. You obtained them in play mode and could use them to decorate both the level and yourself. A basic level could still be saved for being utterly beautiful, with the term eye candy level being used for this exact thing. I said this game was physics-based, and I meant it. Wood, stone, and metal are all the same thing with different weights. Sponge is grabbable, polystyrene also exists, glass is slippery and transparent, dissolvable dissolves, pink floaty is light as air, peach floaty is lighter, and dark matter has no physics. These fundamental materials mean that you can make pretty much anything. What LittleBigPlanet had was a low skill floor and a tremendously high skill ceiling. You could make a calculator in this game, but since you only have tags and tag sensors, each individual bit has to look like this, so calculators quickly become problematic, as you'd have to be manually coding in binary for each integer. But you could do it. Though a good game comes down to level design, it's slightly more crucial to have a fun character. That's where Sackboy comes in. Sackboy is a little knitted fellow that you play as in the entire franchise. His movement is slightly physics-based, with you being a physics entity that can be crushed, burned, electrocuted, plasmaed, drowned, or even a victim of extreme momentum. Sackboy interacts with the world mainly through his abilities to jump and grab, and these two functions make up the entirety of his move kit, minus power-ups. Sackboy himself is incredibly basic, but in a game about what you can create with your mind, having a blank canvas of a character is good. Helping this is his poppet. The poppet is possibly one of the most intuitive menus I've seen in a game. Pressing the square button reveals the poppet menu, and from here, you can kill yourself. Also, you can use text chat, albeit this is the PS3, so buy a keyboard, because controller typing is a bloody nightmare, and that leaves the hearted or favourites menu, where any item you would hearted in your poppet would go, essentially a quick draw of your favourite items, or the stickers and decorations tab, which, unsurprisingly, housed stickers and decorations, but also a photos tool, allowing you to snap any moment as a permanent memory, for better, or for... oh. There were 4 additional things that could be added to your poppet, but only circumstantial. Goodies, tools, and the poppet cursor were all locked to create mode that I just finished rambling about. Pod customization allowed you to save and load pods you'd created, so you could have a variety of strange and eclectic pods at your disposal. But obviously, I'm skirting over the meat of this menu, character customization. This game has some of the greatest character customization of any game, period? On top of the stickers, decorations, and materials you could get from story mode, you could also get costume parts. Sackboy can be dressed up in a nigh infinite number of ways, since not only can you put on a variety of items, some of them react to your poppet colour, and also every single one of these items has a stickerable hitbox, so you can then colour each item however you want with a variety of stickers. In theory, Sackboy has nearly infinite customization. In practice, there are some combinations you just wouldn't use. Helping this is the sheer expressiveness of your sack person, with him being able to move his arms, pelvis, head, and change expressions. Even if this game was a platformer, the most popular levels tended to be survival challenges. Whether ridiculously intricate or painfully simple, most levels you'd see were the same 10 copied levels. A bomb survival level, a train bomb survival level, a shark survival, be a giant and destroy a city. The servers were populated with mostly duplicated clutter, the only major difference being how many keys were forcefully dumped on you at the start of the level. I could dedicate a few minutes to Latin Player 10 and his nefarious conquest of the servers, but I can't be bothered. He did it, we have to live with it. Let's move on. The share mode is obviously the part I should have the most to talk about. Should. Though, my time with LittleBigPlanet 1 compared to its sequels was short. As such, I'm going to instead talk about the glorious thing that is multiplayer. If this game had all the things already mentioned, but no online multiplayer, it would have died in months. There is something so special about creating these strange levels, and then being able to play them in both couch co-op and online co-op, technically both at the same time. You could have 2 people on one PS3, and then the other 2 people on other countries and other PS3s. The internet would have a stroke because this is 2008, but you could do it! Multiplayer is integral to this game's success. You can share as much as you want, but if you're not able to experience it with others, what's the point? Not to mention, features like slapping and stickering each other and the aforementioned taking photos made this into an excellent addition that extended the lifespan of this game tenfold. But by far my favourite levels from LittleBigPlanet 1 were by I'm Attacker. Titanic and Apollo 13 were both levels based on their titular events, and even if it was the same story each time you played it, there was something so charming about the cardboard cutouts used for mission control, or the game's frame rate reducing by 60% when the Titanic started flooding. But by far his best works were Bora Bora Island 1 and 2, a set of vacation-themed levels that just have immaculate vibes, even to this day. Honourable mentions go to levels like Next Stop Little Big City, and that's about it. Like I said, my time with LittleBigPlanet 1 was short. There's something so charming about the first game's aesthetics. Everything is handcrafted, with the planets being held up by string, the pause menu dropping down, the sensors and buttons being very analog, the wires being literal wires. This game doesn't have the traditional cartoony aesthetic of most platformers per se. It instead reads like you're running around a model set. We almost should have gotten some kind of toy train world to really hammer this point home. Oh wait, we almost did. I am still mad about American Midwest Train and the Lost Theme, but the lighting, the world, it all feels so comfortable. Like a higher being crafted this world for us, and we're simply experiencing it. The fact that creator-curators you meet along the way consist of cardboard cutouts, toys and dolls really hammers this home. Craft World feels handcrafted, unsurprisingly. But what really helps to make this world feel so homely is a certain man I need to go on a tangent about. Stephen Fry is the narrator of the LittleBigPlanet games, an omnipresent force that is quite literally the first thing you hear when you boot up the game. This is probably just me talking, but this man goes up alongside Bear from Bear in the Big Blue House and Lemon from Bullet Train as characters I implicitly trust with my life regardless of circumstance. Stephen Fry has immaculate vibes, and the opening speech he gives when you boot the game, set to Orb of Dreamers, which I played a mashup of at the start of this video, makes me feel warm and safe. LittleBigPlanet is the perfect dream world, and Stephen Fry is our unquestioned overlord. I want this man to read me bedtime stories, goddammit! All of the tutorials are read through his voice, with little jokes sprinkled in to keep your little child brain engaged, and others to keep your parents from clawing their eyes out. LittleBigPlanet is a uniquely British game, and Stephen Fry is the prime example about how maybe the British aren't as bad as you guys always joke about, and maybe we should stop bullying the British and bully the French instead. Where was I? Oh, right, immaculate vibes. LittleBigPlanet has such a perfect handcrafted aura, and the music helps this tenfold. While most of the songs for this game were simply licensed out, Matt Clark and Kenneth Young have made a variety of music for the game, the majority being interactive music, or INT music. Yeah, we're going on another tangent. Hi, even if I'm terrible at composing, I love music. I listen to everything from Weather Channel Vaporwave to PlayStation drum and bass, from the rock metal found in Bionicle trailers to Genesis chiptunes. I have no taste, it's purely down to what creates the coolest imaginary fight sequences. Interactive music is a godsend gift, and here's why. Say you like a song, but there's just one instrument from it that doesn't fit the vibe you're going for. With any other song, you'd have to live with it. With interactive music, you can simply turn that slider off. You can control the instrumentals, the volume of the instruments. The same song could be played twice and sound like two unrelated songs. For a game about creating levels, this is perfect. Every little variation of a song can be perfect for a wholly different level. This is great because the selection of songs is, well, they were never going to be able to get every kind of vibe in here. The addition of interactive music means a song can be used more times without getting old. Variation in a game about creation is important. Matt Clark and Kenneth Young cooked, that is all I need to say. There was a lot of DLC released for this game. I'm not going to go over all of it, just the level kits and a few highlights. The Metal Gear Solid kit is up first, and this one adds in Metal Gear Solid. Not really a fan of the franchise, so I can't say much about it there, but it features 6 levels, a variety of stickers, materials, sounds and costumes, but most crucially, it gives Sackboy a gun. A paint gun. The Paintinator is the first instance of a gameplay mechanic being locked behind DLC, and as much as I hate to say it, get used to it. The Paintinator was used liberally in a lot of levels outside of this pack, allowing for shooting-based levels to be added to the repertoire of levels you could make. A lot of poor taste levels were made that day. But also zombie levels, so 50-50. Oh, yeah, this one. It was free and added in a bunch of minor gameplay mechanics like the infinite life checkpoint, the daylight tweaker, tetherless jetpack, enhancement remover, visibility settings for connectors, and tweakable angle ranges. This felt more like an update than a DLC, but it was free. It's also called the Creator Pack 1, which implies there were more going to happen, but mysteriously never did. Irritatingly, this pack features an excellent background and soundtrack, both of which were not added to the game. I'm still angry about this, it has been well over 13 years. The monster kit, on the other hand, adds very little. The level you get for it feels more like riding in a haunted house, and it also adds in the Possessed Man 1 and 2 sounds, which would be used liberally on horror levels, alongside Tears in the Wind. This kit may not have much content, but it had one hell of an effect on the game. The History kit is even worse than the Monster kit in terms of this, as you just run to the right. This definitely felt like a lesser addition, but content is content. And this is probably why the History kit felt so boring. The Pirates of the Caribbean, which I will now just call the Pirates kit, added one major crucial thing: water. Water was not in the base game, and so before this point people would traditionally just take sponge, make it blue, shrink it, and make big piles of it. As you might expect, that had impact on the game's frame rate, so this kit aimed to rectify that. It's alright, though water would go on to spawn the dreaded shark survival level, so... This is an especially odd one. An Incredibles kit in 2010? Well, we were originally gonna get a Wall-E kit, but someone at Disney was a coward, and now we're never gonna get a cool apocalypse-themed level kit, which could have massively improved the vibes of a lot of levels. Incredibles kit is another run-to-the-right situation, but at least it's trying harder, I guess? The final large kit addition to this game was the Marvel kit. It was based off the Marvel comics, and is really interesting to go back to today, mainly just because of after all the MCU slop we've had, it's weird to see the Fantastic Four and X-Men as mainstay Marvel characters. To give you context, the only MCU films out at this point were Iron Man 1, Hulk, and Iron Man 2. As well as these, there were the Marvel costume packs, which are another interesting look into pre-MCU Marvel icons, a variety of packs that crossed over with different franchises, and the Sonic kit, which featured Sonic, Tails, Knuckles, Eggman, and the Werehog. It was 2010. Also a variety of special items you could only get if certain criteria were met. Launch day shirts for the games, the launch day spacesuit, which was re-released on the launch of every new installment and the first anniversary, also the elusive prize crown, which you got for being lucky, I guess. This and the beta test fest were always the items I wanted but could never get. But by far, the most interesting was the music pack, which consisted of 3 songs made for the cut themes: English Seaside, Akibara District, and American Midwest Train. You do not understand the war crimes I'd commit to change the timeline if it meant that there'd been a train world in the final game. Little Big Planet was one of, if not the most technically impressive games of 2008, maybe even the entirety of the PS3's lifespan. It had a star-studded soundtrack, of which these are my favourite songs. And honestly, I'm just glad that... wait, this was just the first game in the franchise. Oh my god.
Come in and make yourself at home.
Thankfully, I'm not planning to cover the same territory again with each of these segments. Unthankfully, every Little Big Planet game has more than enough content to fill each segment. Released in 2009, PSP is the second game in the franchise. It's a really fascinating product, namely because this is an entirely different game, and not just a port like some other PSP games I could name. Mod Nation Racers. Diving right in. Fundamentally, Story Mode has the same function: show off what you could make, give you the items they used to make it, but more crucially for this game, seeing as it's a handheld console, this may be the only content you have for hours at a time. In that context, very serviceable. 7 worlds with 22 levels and 13 minigames. That being said, the worlds here aren't just repackages of the first game, they're 7 wholly new locations. Starting off, we have Down Under, which is Australian themed and... Hey Onion, you're Australian, right?
Yeah, why?
Is this racist?
What?
Other than that, this is a really interesting first world, breaking the first world grass themes that most platformers have. Moving on to the second world, we have the Orient, based on China... Hey Onion, you're Asian, right?
I swear to God.
Is this racist?
What the fuck?
Okay, funny cutaway gag or not, I probably shouldn't let that slide. Racism is bad. Don't think that one's a wild take. LittleBigPlanet is a franchise from 2008 and the devs of it are very British. Not to say British people are inherently racist, but we'll start with PSP. PSP is not by Media Molecule, but Cambridge. The only other franchises of note under their belt was a Beast Wars PS1 game, Medieval, and TV Superstars, which is infamous for destroying your eardrums if you lingered on it for more than 1 second. PSP is the more egregious example of some extreme tone deafness. The 7 themes in this game are based off Australia, China, Afghanistan, Egypt, Switzerland, Hollywood, and Brazil. The only one I'd say is not racist is the Hollywood-inspired theme, Tinseltown. It more so focuses on the basic tropes of Hollywood, such as spy movies and King Kong. While Alpine Run and the Carnival both have some questionable elements under a microscope, and Golden Sands and the Bazaar both pass barely, having elements that seem a little derivative but otherwise excusable, the first 2 themes in this game, Down Under and the Orient, are not excusable, especially the Orient. Starting with Down Under, for your first impression of Australia, it has everything you'd expect. Kangaroos, koalas, so on, so forth. The only special thing is the depiction of Aboriginals. Now, if this was the only questionable element in this game, perhaps I wouldn't have felt the need to talk about it. But the Orient throws any goodwill I could have had out the window. Now, the main character, Emperor Sario, technically has giant eyebrows, but when you consider it's being viewed in a 480p screen, those eyebrows just look like slant eyes. And even if we give Sario a pass, the very next character you see is this guy. This character's supposed to be an engineer, why does he have a straw hat? PSP's depictions of Aboriginals, the Chinese, and while not as egregious, other cultures from the Middle East is really unacceptable. However, the PS3 game has a character we need to talk about too. Z-Dude is the antagonist of the Metropolis. He's a stereotypical gangster character with bouncers and commits various crimes, such as Grand Theft Auto, attempted murder, vandalism, and others. LittleBigPlanet was made by British people in 2008. Having a gangster character in the Metropolis is not a problem, the same way having the corrupt Sheriff Zapata isn't a problem in the canyons, and the evil sumo is on thin ice, very thin ice. The only thing stopping me from calling this guy racist is the fact that fat people just tend to have those eye-fold things. But having the gangster character be a distinctly dark-skinned individual with an afro, big nose, and big lips, well, that is how it looks, yeah. I took the liberty of taking every character who uses a magic mouth item and split them into 3 categories. Characters whose mouths seem to fit the face size, characters with stylistically small mouths, and characters with stylistically large ones. The only other characters with large mouths also have big noses, but their proportions are distinctly different. Black character with big lips is a trait seen in blackface and stereotypes seen in minstrel shows. Z-Dude's design, intentional or not, reeks of some extremely questionable choices. This is a game for children. This could be a child's first impression of a culture. And while Z-Dude and the other items from LBP1 get away with a bit of an eyebrow raise, the Orient, and by extension PSP, are particularly unforgivable. I know that as a white British myself and a student of game design, not media studies or some other course that'd give me merit, I know I'm not the person to talk about this. It's safe to say my credit is decently small. But at the end of the day, if I don't bring this up, it'd be like pretending this wasn't a thing. There's a few things I didn't bring up, but if I went through every item in the franchise and pretended it was my job to decide if it was or wasn't racist, I'd be pretending I know better than other people. And I really don't. The first 2 entries in this franchise both had some dubious depictions of races and places. Thankfully, they learned their lesson or just ran out of ideas, as by the next major game, we'd switched from culture-based to aesthetic-based. To end this tangent, story mode does its job and does it well, but it also has a very so-so story again. In this one, you're an errand boy to make sure everyone has clear enough schedules to go to a festival. Fun! This was a game on the PSP. They didn't have to make a create mode. The PSP, in terms of power, sits between the PS1 and PS2. LittleBigPlanet was a game that could make the PS3 shudder. There's no way they did it with minimal sacrifices. The major differences that are immediately apparent is that instead of 3 layers, we're down to 2. If that is the main sacrifice we had to make, then I'm fine with it. Other sacrifices included reduced vertex editing capability, and the addition of a feature that should have been in mainline games, static materials. In LittleBigPlanet 1, if you wanted something to float, it had to be propped up by dark matter, a material that wasn't affected by the in-game physics engine. Here, while the physics engine does exist, you can simply tell an object that it doesn't have to adhere to it, and boom, it no longer needs to be supported by another material, it just floats. We will not see this feature again for a few games. This create mode might not have many interesting merits of its own accord, but Jesus Christ, they managed to make it work on the PSP! That is merit enough! Never used it. though a quick skim over the most popular levels seems to indicate that most of the levels were just recreations of other franchises or creations from the console version. A lot of it was just kinda bad though, whether because it was too difficult, a lack of attention span, the tiny screen, the counterintuitive controls, or hey, maybe just because anyone with a PSP usually also had a PS3. The vibes of the game are very much the vibes of the first game, just with fewer polygons. Yeah, there's not much to say here either. Lumping the DLC in here too, it looks like a majority of the DLC was just ported over content from the console version, and while it does appear that original DLC was made for this game, there's seemingly no footage of it on the internet. As such, this whole section is kind of a dead end. Thankfully, we didn't lose it all, as we have the footage of the infamous Sack Nana, which has gained second life as a meme, albeit with a cat's face photoshopped on there. There's a lot less to say about LBP PSP. If I had diehard sweated these games out as a young one, maybe I'd have more to say, but no one really owned a PSP. The DS was the portable handheld of choice, and my PSP just evaporated one day. I'd love to find it again, but my most poignant memory of the PSP is that I had a pirated copy of it and Mod Nation Racers, the only game my PSP actually legally owning being a copy of LEGO Star Wars 2. Of its soundtrack, my favourite songs this time were these. PSP is an amazing game from a technical perspective, and it's still an absolute robbery that none of its content was ever recycled for DLCs for one of the later games, but it's kind of a footnote in the legacy of the franchise. Speaking of footnotes, the PlayStation Move. It existed and then it didn't. But as one of Sony's main mascots who didn't pump people full of lead or fight unwieldy gods, or wasn't already caught up in what would be one of the most that happened crossover games of all time, it was up to Sackboy to save the day once again. He did his best. Prehistoric Moves is more of a DLC than its own game. However, it was released as its own game. The story is that, well, you see, there's Sackboy, and he's in ancient times with dinosaurs, and you have the PlayStation Move, and there's certainly the PlayStation Move. The closest thing to a story is that Big Rex, a giant red T-Rex, is a professional hater and tries to kill you multiple times. There's no create mode, and so no share mode. It kitbashes music and content from LBP1, so the only way to discuss this game is from a gameplay perspective. It is LittleBigPlanet platforming, but with a second player saddled with the PlayStation Move. It's not fun as much as it is finicky. The only reason you'd want to play this is if you have 4 local friends who all want to play a LittleBigPlanet game, and at that point just buy a lottery ticket, because what are the odds of finding that? And can they be my friends? I had to research how the PlayStation Move worked for this section. See, this is what I thought the PlayStation Move looked like, and that is correct. However, there's also this accessory for the PS Move that functions like a Wii nunchuck. You either play with this, or a regular controller, but you need the PS Move to play this game. As for the Move functionality in this game, you pointed at pink things and moved them around. This game feels like a bloated DLC. It's very much a resounding eh. But it's important to note that this game uses the term Sackboy rather than LittleBigPlanet. The key difference? Create mode. If the game lacks a create mode, it isn't LittleBigPlanet. No favourite songs for this section, unsurprisingly.
They call it LittleBigPlanet.
Oh boy, time for the big one. Of the entire franchise, I'd argue that this game had the largest impact on me. Not just because of the game itself, the tools, the materials, but in truth, the main thing was the community, the dive-in feature, a misclick, and a friendship I've had for nearly 12 years now. It's tough for me to talk about this game. This should be a slam dunk, but it's surprisingly hard for me to find the words to describe how I feel about this game. This is the greatest game of all time, and I am not using hyperbole. The story mode of LittleBigPlanet 2 is the first in the franchise to feel like an actual story is occurring, and not just you being subject to the whims of others. This game has an actual villain, who is set up from the start, the Negativitron. Now, unlike the Collector, who was just lonely, or Big Rex, who was a professional hater, this guy is an actual villain with powers and evil forces, and while he's very much a one-dimensional villain, he's a true force of nature. This time around, there's 6 worlds, but the amount of levels per world is increased with much more diversity in playstyle, totaling out 30 levels, 20 minigames, 12 cutscenes. The themes this time are based on aesthetics rather than cultures. This is good, because after just 2 games, they'd hit most of the cultural styles found across the world. I'm going to go over each theme and what I think of them. Da Vinci's hideout is a completely functional and serviceable first world. It's a library, and Larry Da Vinci himself is quite the quintessential tutorial character. It also introduces the grappling hook. LittleBigPlanet 2 had a lot more focus on adding to Sackboy's arsenal, both in create and play mode, and the grappling hook is an excellent example of this. Victoria's laboratory is this steampunk sort of vibe, mixed with cake. It introduces the Grabinators, the Creatinators, and oh my... alright. Yeah. Okay. Victoria's lab also has one of my personal favourite themes, and a train level set to one of my favourite songs in the game. So, while it may be biased speaking, I really like Victoria's laboratory. But not as much as I like the Factory of a Better Tomorrow, a not-so-subtle communism allegory crossed with hamster tubes. This world serves to introduce Sackbots, which, as you may be able to guess, are robotic Sackboys. They can be used to act, as puzzles, or even as weapons of war. But here, they're shown as what boils down to an escort puzzle. Thankfully, this is not insufferable, as you don't actually have to save all the Sackbots, that just nets you additional prizes at the end of the level. Plus we've got Clive. This miserable flip book of a man wallows in his failure, and proclaims himself
cold, gloomy, and dead inside.
He's an excellent character, no flaws, 10 out of 10. Music is perfectly sad and depressing, but has tracks that can make it sound grandiose, just as how your presence makes this factory into a true better tomorrow. Avalonia has the greatest vibe of the entire game, that being the future. And it also has some of the most unfun levels in the entire game. Now, important to note, not uncreative. Every single level in Avalonia is a creative masterclass, as it introduces you to the Controlinator. We'll elaborate on that later, but you pilot bunnies, dogs, hamsters, camels, bees a second time, bees a third time. Avalonia loves bees! Avalon is insufferable, but in a good way. The music is another personal favourite. Again, the vibes are excellent here. Eve's Asylum for the Mentally Alternative, what a mouthful, is my least favourite theme. Not that it's uncreative, but it's just a bit boring. This ecological utopia, so it's mostly just green, with everything being on fire from the invasion of the meanies. Yes, that's their name. Eve exists, and I don't know how I feel about the body, but the head being an apple with a chunk bitten out of it in a cage is really a genius design. And while the nurse design is also fine, why is she built like that? The Cosmos is the final theme of the game, and unsurprisingly, it's based off an arcade. A space-themed arcade, with Japanese lights and text at the top. Wait a second. The Cosmos makes me sad that the Akihabara district wasn't added again, but it's got some great music, some challenging levels, and serves very much to wrap up the game in both story and design, and has an interesting final boss. Because in what other game can you fight a phase as a hamster and a bee before finally defeating it with cakes? It also has this arcade section where you can enter the Konami code to see this, which translates to free love on a phone keyboard. Based? This game also rewards you for sitting through the credits. Every game should do this. LittleBigPlanet 1 gave you all the tools to make a platforming game. And as pretty much every single video essay about this game would say, LittleBigPlanet 2 gives you the tools to make a platform for games. But when you've already made the materials and different types of bolts and motor bolts and spring bolts and winches and pistons and... when you've already made so many items that move things around, how do you improve? Well, you start by doing away with the binary system needed for any kind of basic logic in the first game. AND gates, OR gates, XOR gates, NOT gates, counters, timers, selectors, randomizers, and microchips to put all this stuff on so it doesn't take up too much space. And this is just the start, with there being so many more sensors and movers and some tools I've never even used. On top of this, you have tweakers. Gone are the days of having to manually connect every object to a piece of dark matter. Now anything can float, or sort of float, or float until you interact with it. Material tweakers, so anything can be grabbable or non-grabbable, slippery, bouncy, and so on and so forth. You can change the gravity for those levels where you want to ban the player from jumping. These are the small things. The big four we've already sort of discussed, but I'm going to explain them more. The Creatinator is essentially a Paintinator from the Metal Gear DLC, but it can fire anything. A portable emitter on one's head, which actually has more function than you might initially think. Sure, you could put a flamethrower on your head, but you can also have it shoot platforms or do other interesting things. I don't know, to be honest, but this meant the player could now technically wield any kind of emitter-based power-up, so that's good. The Sackbots, as I mentioned earlier, contain some basic AI to follow, flee, move a set recorded path, follow tags, or just idle. They're perfect for programmable enemies or NPCs. You can also stick a magic mouth on them and record audio to make them say whatever you want, provided you want it to be something that's sung at approximately 2 bytes per second. Now we're on to the most important addition to LittleBigPlanet 2, the Controlinator. This bad boy changes the game entirely. You go from making platformers to making top-down shooters, kart racers, literally any game you want. What's even better is, it has a functional user interface that doesn't hurt my brain. I can't even begin to explain this device because I personally didn't use it much because I only learned logic in the third game. There's also the sequencer, which lets you put things on a set timeline, with you being able to change the amount of time per stripe. This is paired best with the movie camera. This, well, guess what this does? With this in combination with sackbots and sequences, you could make entire short movies, the only limit being the thermometer, which does not enjoy you making short movies, especially if you're using a lot of sackbots and magic mouths. One of my favourite levels that would struggle to load was a recreation of the opening cutscene from Sonic CD that ran at 8 frames per second and had every frame taken with the PlayStation camera, and due to the nature of the level, would take approximately 1 year to load. And that's not even everything. We're also going to use this section to discuss some of the other multiplayer features of this game. Community levels were one thing, but the community itself was something else. LittleBigPlanet actively tried to encourage you to play with others through 2 functions. Every time you join a level, assuming you don't turn it off, you're asked if you want to play alone or with other players. This may seem a tad annoying, but it's more so tying into the other function, Dive In. Dive In allows you to be connected to a random player on the servers, provided that they're hosting a Dive In session. And it's thanks to this feature that this video exists, this channel exists, the characters I use exist. Pretty much everything I have owes to the fact that I met my best friend of 12 years through this feature. Seriously, this feature changed my life for the better, and that's not doing any major hyperbole. Another new addition to this game is pins. Pins are essentially in-game vanity trophies you can show off to your friends. You get them for any number of reasons, from making a level, to slapping multiple friends, to sitting through the credits, to getting the ever-elusive crown. As for the levels being made, well, the new game brought the advent of a whole new plague, the Mortal Kombat level. You'd be strapped into these rock'em sock'em robots and dropped into a level that was usually made of the most visually egregious materials, while a Sackboy would sing LMFAO's Sexy and I Know It, or some other equally bit-crunched song. But if you could wade through the sludge, you'd find some properly fine levels. Jeff the Killer is one of the cheesiest but most iconic levels this time around, as we're now into the early 2010s, where creepypastas scare the crap out of little kids who shouldn't even know they exist. Other creepypasta characters also had levels, but the Jeff the Killer level by Crimson Fang 9 is the only one I'd talk about favourably. That, and the Chicken Man, which is made by the same guy, and it's about the Chicken Man. But thanks to all the new tools, we had some truly amazing levels this time around. Prop Hunt is playable in LittleBigPlanet 2, and it had a variety of maps, although the best one was the house one. There was also Hide and Seek, which is self-explanatory, Survival Soldiers, which I couldn't get to run on an emulator, but was essentially a base defense game where you would collect resources during the day and fight off waves at night. Another was Angry Whale Survival, which, unlike the Shark Survival levels where you were being pursued by instant death homing missiles, Angry Whale Survival was a slower, more methodical level with actual content that you could enjoy with your friends. Flare Island existed, and I will forever stand by it being pretty alright, but my friends would try to kill me if I asked to play it for footage. And so on and so forth. Attacker made magical toys, and while incredibly impressive, it's usually not brought up in the same breath as LBP1 works. LBP2 also brought a lot of RPG levels into the fray, as thanks to the versus mechanic introduced, you could have online players be on different screens to each other. This meant people could do all kinds of vaguely interesting things, like City RPG, or Boat RPG, or Work and Buy, which was actually cool, so that one gets a pass. LittleBigPlanet 2 opened the door to literally any kind of game, and the best game of all was Ransack. Ransack is essentially a series of Mario Party minigames, but being able to play these minigames with your own costumes against friends and AI on the PS3 across the internet in 2011? Yeah, I'm thinking peak. Once more, we have a variety of DLC kits that added new gameplay features. Here we go again. It's safe to say us not getting the Wall-E kit led to us getting this kit instead. In terms of aesthetic, it's okay. In terms of themes, it's alright. In terms of character design, it's serviceable. The Toy Story kit really feels like the first kit to come out, because there's no new gameplay features and some of the level concepts feel oddly similar to ideas that weren't fully realised in the base game. It's a completely okay kit, except for the character voices, which is weird, because all characters use mumble speech, but for some reason here it just sounds off. Less than a year after Sackboy's prehistoric moves, we got this. It added in an interesting mechanic for the move integration, an objectively superior aesthetic and vibe, and the sticker panel, which was like holograms but objectively superior. It also added in a bunch of new sounds for the music sequencer, and I forgot to talk about the music sequencer. Okay, quick summary, it's a MIDI creator. Yeah, that's about it. The Move pack was a great pack that I never played, because owning a PlayStation Move was for silly Americans who had too much disposable income. Now this is something I can get excited over. The Muppets kit, unsurprisingly, was about the Muppets. It featured all your favourites, like Fozzie, Beaker, Miss Piggy, Skinned Kermit Pelt, and Rolf. On top of introducing some new materials that were pretty handy, it also introduced the Attracto gel, which turned any surfaceable into a walkable one, to mixed effects, as the physics engine did not like this. The main issue I had was that the Grabinators didn't work with it, since they always put the item above the player's head and don't adjust relative to player angle. While it's a little jank, a new gameplay feature is always nice. One issue I have with the LittleBigPlanet 2 DLC kits is how much less accessible they were, and unsurprisingly the cross-controller kit, which required you to own both LBP2 and LBP PS Vita, was a DLC kit I never played. It looks... It's got wonderful aesthetics, a lot of new music was made for it, a new background, all of it is space themed. I'm very angry, but there's nothing I can do. So it is what it is, what it is, what it is. The Nightmare Before Christmas level kit, which is a hell of a name, keeps up the tradition of the half-assed end of lifespan run to the right DLC. A single level with a bunch of Nightmare Before Christmas themed items, nothing I'm gonna write home about. I will instead be writing home about the DC Comics Premium Level Pack, which is the only one to call itself a level pack and also a premium level pack. Odd syntax aside, it earns the premium. This pack adds in multiple new features that are all really good. The hero cape allows you to glide, which isn't particularly interesting, but it's a superhero level kit, so I'm not going to judge it. Flying in superheroes like ham and cheese. The sticker rotator rotates stickers, but the big two are the memorizer and the wall jump material. Wall jumping is just a really fun element for platforming levels, but the memorizer, oh my god, the memorizer. This bad boy can save data, which means hub worlds, RPGs with saving, levels that can memorize if you've played them or not, all suddenly became a possibility. And on top of this, the pack itself is actually pretty solid. Premium is right. There were also the creator kits, which came out seasonally for winter, spring, summer, and autumn. These all added various stickers and decorations, blah blah blah. LittleBigPlanet 2 is a technical upgrade to the first, but the visuals have received a slight downgrade. This is because of the sheer amount of extra stuff in here, but the UI is a lot less real feeling. Gone are the menus dropping down, there's no more strings holding up your Earth and Moon, and so on and so forth. The actual feel of the UI is thankfully improved, but the charm is certainly decreased. We're also going to take a second to talk about something I didn't last time, a certain composer's work for the franchise. Daniel Pemberton is a niche, obscure composer you might have heard of. He did a few projects for a few obscure little titles. He's also an incredibly based British guy who makes banger after banger, once again proving that you should stop making fun of the British. Here in LittleBigPlanet, he created a variety of songs for the first and second games, mostly from the Daniel Pemberton TV orchestra. But unsurprisingly, I'm not going to risk playing these songs, with one exception, the Orb of Dreamers. I opened the video with this banger for a reason. This song is something else entirely, man. It's probably nostalgia, but Orb of Dreamers hits something else in my soul. It's so class. So very class. LittleBigPlanet 2 doesn't just hold the merit for being one of the greatest sequels of all time. It holds the merit for, in my humble opinion, being the greatest game of all time. Unironically. This game had a bustling community, create mode that was simple to pick up but boundless in possibility, and a constant stream of DLC that could have kept the game alive. They could have ported this game to the PS4 as a launch title, called it some stupid thing like LittleBigPlanet 2 Deluxe, increased the thermometer, added in some new basic features, and people would have ate it up. Though, of course, as made clear, this game has the most biased skew in my mind. Without this game, I'd be a wholly different person. To conclude, my favourite songs this time were these. Now into spin-off purgatory we go once more.
And the painting is LittleBigPlanet.
In In the same way that LittleBigPlanet 1 has a portable equivalent on the PSP, LittleBigPlanet 2 got one as a PS Vita game, LittleBigPlanet Vita. I never played this game. The most personal experience I can share with Vita is a tale of decision making. In 2016, I asked for a new 3DS. My parents told me I could either get that or a PS Vita. Since it was 2016, I knew that the Vita was pretty mediocre and unsupported by most developers unless you were a very sad or lonely individual, so I chose the new 3DS. I got so much mileage out of scanning amiibos without an add-on, so that's been a personal victory for me. The only two games on the Vita I would have played would have been LBP Vita and Mod Nation Racer's Road Trip, which was just the PS3 version with all of the DLC. While I can't play it, and I can't emulate it, and I am not spending £100 on a PS Vita, and I don't know anyone in my area who's willing to let me borrow theirs, I can watch a playthrough and make observations. So, here's my observations. The story of Vita takes place on Carnivalia, a planet that shows up next to Craftworld. Quickly, it begins feeding on the joy of the planet as, okay, real quick, just gonna pop the old clown warning for this section. Carnivalia is carnival themed, put 2 and 2 together. Skip this whole bit. So, Vita consists of a series of carnival-themed worlds. La Marionetta is circus train themed. Yay train, nay circus. Not enough train. Fine introduction world. Land of Odd is junk themed. It's a fine theme, but it also reminds me a lot of the Move Pack. Jackpot City is awesome. It's a sci-fi theme with VCR tapes and... I don't know, it's cool. Sean Braun is neat too. Coaster Valley is roller coaster themed. Oh my god, why didn't I purchase a PS Vita when I could? That is everything I could have ever wanted. Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. I love roller coasters. Spooky Mansion. It's alright. Levels are interesting. Again, feels like I took assets from the Move Pack. Since this was a pick-up-and-play kind of console, there were a variety of minigames that were baked into the game that could be played solo or with friends. Great concept. Writing from a visual perspective, the gameplay concept is genius. The PS Vita has 2 touchscreens, use them to control create mode. Excellent. But that's about all I can say. I could Google the most popular levels or DLCs, but that's a whole other level of disingenuous. Vita was the one that got away. I never experienced it, and that's weird. This is a decently big game. I think a big part of me always intended to get around to it, but I never did. I suppose in however many years it takes, I'll get a PS Vita and play it, but that won't change the fact that there's no nostalgia for this installment. Womp womp? Womp womp.
Sackfolk, start your cerebral engines, for this is LittleBigPlanet Karting.
Of all the spin-offs, none of them are stranger than LittleBigPlanet Karting. Not because a kart racer was a strange place to take this very obviously kiddie character, but because of how it turned out. LittleBigPlanet Karting is a Nutella steak, and I will explain what that means later. But let's start this the same way we started all of these. Karting returns to the franchise roots, by having you just go from place to place until you end up in the right place to stop the bad guy. The themes are mostly recycled from the existing games, with the only new themes being Monster Island, a pretty bog-standard theme that does what it says on the tin, and the Progress Emporium, which is like the factory of a better tomorrow, but for capitalism. While the returning themes may be pretty uninteresting, I'd like to give massive points to the Space Base, which may reuse more of Avalonia than I'd like, but it's also a space station nightclub that gives us Captain Sirius Oculus, who is the second greatest character behind Clive and is a funk-loving robot who looks like this. And you know what? Maybe this game's story is actually pretty good. The villains of this game are also a highlight, being the Horde. The Horde kind of fall into a trope of the franchise about creativity, being essentially the same morals-wise as the Collector, stealing whatever they desire. Unlike the Collector, who was a stupid little whiny loser, the Horde are actually kind of interesting, being goofy and silly and stupid and all the things you want from evil goons. Horde Sweet Horde, their home planet, is also a garage, and I think that's one of the few genius decisions this game made. It's a story that is completely serviceable, but there's some issues bubbling under the surface. Seeing as this is not the traditional gameplay style, we need to discuss it. It's a kart racer, and so as with all kart racers, you've got your normal drive and drift. This game also lets you choose between the X and R2 buttons for your acceleration, a feature that more games should have. On top of the normal pod and character customization, which have both unfortunately taken a hit this time around, you can customize your kart with one of 6 suspensions, though they all seemingly handle the same and just serve to make funny, goofy karts. All karting games have a weapon system, and this one is kinda bad. See, it's hard to decipher, to the point where I don't think there's any real detailed notes on the wiki about it, but here's how I think it works. Red weaponators are homing, green weaponators are non-homing, and blue weaponators are player relative. This causes a bit of an issue though, because the weapon variety is abysmal. Not that there aren't many, but that they're nearly all the same in terms of functionality. You have a green single mine and a green multi-mine, multiple different red rocket types, 2 different blue boost items, it all just kind of blurs together. To compare this to the gold standard of kart races, Mario Kart, every single item in this game is distinctly unique, with the exception of triple variants, but even then you can quickly spot that this item is a triple green shell and that this one is a single red shell. In karting, you've not got this luxury, as at a quick glance, a lot of these items look identical. This will not be the last time I compare this game to a different kart racer, but first, we need to talk about... The create mode in karting works wildly different to the one in LittleBigPlanet, and arguably works more similar to a different game made by the developers of this one, United Front Games, may they rest in peace. See, before making the LittleBigPlanet video, I wanted to do a Mod Nation Races video, but plans fell through. So here, dear viewer, is... Mod Nation Races is a 2010 kart racer that definitely owes a lot to LittleBigPlanet, from the fact that the play, create, share ideology on the PS3 launched with LittleBigPlanet 1, to the fact that a demo with it came free on the disc of LittleBigPlanet 2, or at least my copy did. Mod Nation Races, like LittleBigPlanet, prioritized player creativity, allowing them to customize their car, mod, and tracks to their heart's content. I'll maybe do a more in-depth explanation in a future video that won't happen, but right now, we need to focus on how the game lets you customize these 3 things. Kart and mod customization is pretty much the same, with you being able to colour and materialize each part of their body, and then place stickers and decorations in a very precision-based method. Track creation is done by paving out the track with a steamroller, and then you can populate the track by placing objects, or letting the game auto-decorate the level for you. You can fill it with little gameplay elements and then go ham. Okay, yeah, so what does this have to do with create mode? Well, let's play the comparison game and you'll quickly understand. Nutella steak, a term I personally use to refer to when you take 2 good things and combine them into something so rotten, so mouldy, that it develops penicillin and kills the mold, leading to something that's technically edible, but is unpleasant and jarring. Yeah, this game is a Nutella steak. Let me take you through every element of the game and show you how it is truly... yuck. In LittleBigPlanet, customization is done through the poppet. Stickers and decorations are relative to the individual part you sticker. In Mod Nation Races, each part can be added, coloured and materialed in a submenu, found inside a submenu, found inside a... oh, yeah. Each sticker and decoration is added relative to a part. In karting, stickers seem to randomly affect the entire body for no reason, and customization is done through the poppet. This means that parts cannot be easily coloured without accidentally turning your entire sack person into that colour. Kart customization has the same issue. Stickering these things is also tough because the camera is constantly fixed to be relative to the pod. Create mode in LittleBigPlanet works by having Sackboy as your camera, hovering around the level, making it easy to drop in and test something without needing to go into play mode. You place objects through a cut-and-stick vertex-based placing mode. Create mode in Mod Nation Races works by letting you pave the ground beneath you. We've already explained this bit. How'd they Nutella stake it? Well, they kept in the floating Sackboy. Instead of being able to quickly navigate around the level with a camera, you're navigating Sackboy around the level. This does not mean he can be taken out of hover mode, he's just here, hanging around. You can place geometric shapes, but they're a lot slower and more precise due to being in 3D, and decorations can then be placed on top. Slowly. So, if karting pulls directly from these 2 sources, does that mean the actual gameplay is unaffected since LBP was never a kart racer? Well, can I copy your homework? Kart races are inherently random. Your entire game can be messed up by a player getting a lucky roll. LittleBigPlanet Karting takes elements from Mod Nation Races, changes them, and fundamentally seems to misunderstand how the mechanics worked. This is your boost meter, or as I call it, the skillometer. The more you drift, hit enemies, and do spins, the more you get boost. Boost is then spent on boost, shielding, or sideswiping. Boost is self-explanatory, but the other two are really interesting. Shielding, as mentioned before, adds skill. If you perform well, you're rewarded with not being destroyed by Geneva Convention violating weapons. As for sideswiping, this is one of the most charming elements of Mod Nation races. By spending some boost, you can take out a racer who's next to you, and while the window to hit them is short, the reward is more than you put in. The ratio is a little unforgiving, but if you've got boost to burn it. Switch over to karting, and while it may look like the bar doesn't exist, its remnants can still be felt. Rather than the bar here, it's the score meter here. However, you can't spend this. Meanwhile, shielding is gone, replaced with the far inferior gameplay mechanic of blocking attacks with attacks. This is more like Mario Kart, and that is not a good thing. Sideswiping is now the much less effective slap, and while it is in the ethos of LittleBigPlanet, it's also not really very useful. There's seemingly no cost to use it, but there's also seemingly no real reward for doing it. But this isn't everything. I can't explain why LittleBigPlanet Karting feels slower, tankier, and less engaged compared to the higher octane and fast-paced Mod Nation races, but this is probably because Mod Nation races is a surprisingly tough game if you weren't the best of the best, and for LittleBigPlanet Karting, it feels like they shaved it down to make an easier game for less skilled players. This also makes it a bore coming from Mod Nation races, because you're playing a game that's slower and less involved with less clear mechanics. Another instance of this issue is the weapons system. In Mod Nation races, there were only 4 weapon types: missile, sound, electric, and boost. For a kart racer, that seems odd until you realise each one has 3 stages. Level 1s are much more close range and situational, level 2s tend to target the player directly in front of you, and level 3s will wipe out everyone in the map in front of you unless they shield. The boost obviously doesn't adhere to this, being a speed boost, auto drive boost, and time jump respectively. In LittleBigPlanet Karting, as discussed earlier, 3 colours, lots of weapons in each colour, unclear and complicated. In Mod Nation races, each weapon was a distinct colour and icon. Mod Nation races UI is just way tighter than LittleBigPlanet Karting's. Everything you see on screen here has a purpose for a kart racer. Not so much here. The little new that they did add doesn't add much. The grappling hook is just visual flair that punishes you for not pressing a button, and the window to press this button is dubious. So, you took the mechanics of 2 very different good games and combined them to make something that feels clunky and just outright bad. Nutella meets steak. Even after that lengthy grilling, pun intended, did this game still have the active community you'd want from a LittleBigPlanet game? It was mainly just recreations of Mario tracks. Okay, well obviously not mainly, but that's what came to the surface. Unlike LBP2, which could be anything, karting could only be one thing. And it was kind of bad at that one thing. Mod Nation Races was so fun, not because of its levels, but because of the mechanics in them. Karting removed those mechanics, and so while you could still make great tracks, there was a lot less fun to it. I love Nutella, and I love steak. I love LittleBigPlanet, and I love Mod Nation Races. In the files of LittleBigPlanet Karting is evidence that it was supposed to be a Mod Nation Races 2, but Sony made them change it in hopes that it would make the franchise succeed. If Mod Nation Races 2 had been a launch title for the PS4, perhaps the franchise would have found a second wind. But as it stands, United Front Games closed in 2016, and Mod Nation Races died with it. I've maybe been unjustly harsh on this game. I want to make it clear that there's passion and charm in this game, it's just a shame it came out the way it did. LBPK was made with respect, but also made with a hefty bit of studio meddling. I'm not sure if United Front intentionally dumbed it down due to criticisms of Mod Nation, or if they were made to, but either way, this sanded down farce of a Mod Nation Races game has some amazing ideas in a pretty uninteresting shell. LittleBigPlanet Karting's servers shut down on the 2nd of July 2018. Soundtrack absolutely slapped though. Oh boy! From the most mediocre game in the franchise to the most forgettable? Please keep in mind that while these games weren't my cup of tea, LittleBigPlanet 2 was still active and in support. Spin-offs can afford to be meh. The base game was excellent. That being said, this is just an idle runner. Like, you tap the screen and Sackboy jumps, you're being chased by the Negativatron, it uses pre-existing songs from the franchise, notably the ones that weren't licensed. I am trying my very best to think of anything of value for this. It gave away free costumes if you got stickers, but said stickers were really hard to get. I ended up just being given the codes by a friend because they managed to get them twice. I Yeah, let's move on. They could have ported this game to the PS4 as a launch title, called it some stupid thing like LittleBigPlanet 2 Deluxe, increased the thermometer, added in some new basic features, and people would have ate it up. In 2013, Sony announced LittleBigPlanet Hub. Hub was going to be a free-to-play LittleBigPlanet game which would seemingly consolidate the content of the prior games, adding in challenges and other features. At its core, this would be create and share, but with no story mode that wasn't just ported from a prior game. It was going to be released in 2013 on the PS3. In 2014, we got LittleBigPlanet 3 for the PlayStation 3 and 4. This game is the member of the franchise I spent the most time with, but let me give you some details behind the scenes. In 2012, growing bored of the franchise, Media Molecule left LittleBigPlanet to work on a much more ambitious project for the PS4, Dreams. This was released in early 2020 and has already cut its 10-year plan to a mere 3 years, ending support about a month or so before this video releases. So, what of LittleBigPlanet? Well, the DLC was developed by a few studios, namely Tarsier and The Station, but as a new console generation loomed, it seemed time for LittleBigPlanet to make the jump. After all, could you imagine the technical prowess that the franchise could harness on a much more powerful console? Mainly just larger levels, but larger levels is good! Well, who to develop a new installment in the franchise? Well, over on the PS Vita, XDev, Tarsier, and Double 11 had done a pretty solid job of getting LBP to run on something marginally less powerful than a PS3, so why not them? Well, yeah, but you'd need a particularly big studio to fill the void left by MM. Enter stage left, Sumo Digital. Sumo was known for such hits as Sega Superstars Tennis, Sonic and All-Stars Racing Transformed, and Moshi Monsters, Katsuma Unleashed. We were in hands, alright. So, let's see what happened. LittleBigPlanet 3's story mode is visually more ambitious, but a lot simpler. You go from place to place, recruiting the heroes of Bunkum to save it from Newton, a lightbulb man who's never had a good idea in his life. There's 4 worlds: Prologue, Manglewood, Ziggurat, and Bunkum Lagoon. Prologue is a quaint British picnic-looking place. Manglewood is a 50s swamp movie studio. The Ziggurat is Russian, and Bunkum Lagoon is cloud-themed? Fish-themed? I am so confused and lost. Also, part of Bunkum Lagoon is Newton's levels, which were very purple. Already you might be picking up on something, and that is that these 4 could have easily been 5 or 6. 20 levels, 10 minigames, 13 cutscenes, 3 hub worlds. As for the story mode itself, it's alright. It's got a lot of new gimmicks and ideas, the levels all feel distinct, the addition of hub worlds is an interesting touch, and really adds something, being able to access the minigames from the hub world. Character design for the most part pops off, with Newton being a light bulb, Nanapud being a handbag, Marlon Random being film reel, Zoom Zoom being an 8-ball, Papal Mache being paper mache, and this thing also exists. But where things get really wild is the sheer amount of content in the create mode.
They gave me my glasses back. Side effect, they turned my hair into this. Also, now that we're back on official hardware, PlayStation microphones work again. I'm gonna stop doing this because I don't want to hear myself, and I don't think you want to hear me like this either.
Let me just lightning round this really quickly. Opacity, tangibility, physics tweakers, animation tweakers for better cutscenes, more options for how the background works, a bunch of new sensors, doohickeys, whatchamacallits, a bunch of stuff you'll never use, rails which can go between layers for smoother motions or be used for roller coaster levels, which I didn't see anyone do, but the devs claimed to be their inspiration for adding it, and the dynamic thermometer, which allows you to store more level per level by having only the area around the player load in. Also returning from the handheld games is the ability to set objects to static. I am skimming over this because I'm not competent enough to know actually how most of this works. The jump from LittleBigPlanet 2 to LittleBigPlanet 3 may not be as drastic in terms of possible gameplay types, but the technicality of it all definitely was. However, there's a few major things we need to take note of. With the advent of the Creatinator, people found interesting and novel ways to utilise the emitter mechanic to create some strange power-ups. LBP3 decided to give us the ability to make our own power-ups using a variety of bases. This wasn't used much, however, or at least I didn't see many levels using it. You could get more mileage out of simply sticking the player into a sack bot and giving them powers. However, you could also take pre-existing power-ups and add them to the sack pocket, another big addition, where you could press the circle button to get one of 5 power-ups stored. This was, again, not used much outside of story mode, as you usually only want the player to have 1 power-up at a time, and at that point, just give them each power-up individually, rather than using the sack pocket. Another addition was the Organizatron, which allowed you to set quests which could have markers, rewards, and persist between levels. This may get you to wonder how they pulled this off, considering you could only have 20 levels per Earth. That's where LittleBigPlanet 3's greatest feature comes in. Adventures were a feature I used a lot. It allowed you to cram 15 levels into one slot, complete with a world map. Whether you were making linear projects, hub worlds, movies, or just compiling old levels, this was a handy feature to have. This is obviously what the sack pocket and Organizatron were designed for, and an excellent feature, though there was something else that was slightly more to note. Every other LittleBigPlanet game had 3 layers, with the exception of PSP, which had 2. LittleBigPlanet 3 snorts a half-pound of a substance I won't name and goes 16 layers! You know what's weirder? In the alpha version, there was 30. But a layer increase isn't the only massive gameplay switch up LittleBigPlanet 3 gave us. Sackboy receives a new ability, that being climbing. He can now climb up surfaces that are marked as climbable. Also 3 entirely new characters. Oddsock is essentially a faster Sackboy who has the wall jump ability from the DC Comics pack. He can scamper up walls, run fast, he is a dog. Swoop is a bird, essentially a fusion of the jetpack and hero cape power-ups. Yeah, it's a bird alright. Toggle is a character who can shift from small and light to big and heavy. For a franchise that has its roots in physics-based platforming, Toggle is a perfect addition. He probably could have been some kind of power-up, or I guess 2 power-ups. The new characters feel like they were less introduced to be new characters, but more new body types, as Big and Little Toggle especially were used to add more varied shapes to characters, with characters like Zoom Zoom, Papa Mache, and El Jeff being made using these characters. There was also a few new power-ups for Sackboy, albeit they were made using the power-up templates used earlier. The Pumpinator can be used to blow away sponge or bring it towards you. Being the first power-up you get, as Newton says, it sucks, it blows. The Blink Ball is an interesting one. The Creatinator now has a second skin and a less intrusive design, although personally I prefer the Creatinator's shape. The Boost Boots, unsurprisingly, boost the player in a direction. There's also a function to let them refill in midair, which can make for some fascinating gameplay functions. The Hook Hat allowed the player to hook onto rails, a gameplay feature that was very much expected, and honestly these power-ups are all kind of surface level. The Illuminator is just a flashlight. It's used to find secrets in the levels. These power-ups were a bit creatively bankrupt in areas, some more than others, but that's alright. The best ideas had already been done or turned into characters. These power-ups were all made in-game, and I'll give them respect for that. So, you're Sumo Digital and a variety of small studios who have handled ports of the franchise and DLC. Sony comes up to you sometime in 2011 and asks you to make LittleBigPlanet 3 for the PS3. Easy enough, right? Well, you're working with a game engine from the mid-2000s, and the more content you add to the game, the more memory leaks are becoming an issue. Not to mention with the content you intend to add, it's going to be a rough ride. But at least you have to add to the engine and not outright modify it, right? A year or 2 into the project's lifespan, Sony tells you it needs to run on the PS4. Not coming out for the PS4 exclusively, it has to run on the PS3 and PS4. This means you have to get it running on PS4, but it still needs to run on PS3, none of the benefits of either platform. Oh, and it has to be out for the Black Friday of 2014. Media Molecule have offered you the help they can give, but the devs are all busy on their own projects, and you're dealing with a franchise where user-generated content is a heavy focus, so you need it to work and be stable enough to make it into playable levels. You're not just making a sequel to an engine, you're having to redesign the entire game engine. Sumo was doomed from the start. The game design team had a blast, and it shows. Even in this heavily cut down final product, there's so much charm in these levels, but the programmers were clearly suffering. If you made this game, I want to extend a heartfelt apology to you. Because when the game crashed onto store shelves on Black Friday, who do you think people blamed for its subpar quality? Do you think they blamed Sony, the company that rushed a product to market? Or do you think we blamed Sumo, the developers? There's cut content all over this game. Cut characters, cut concepts, cut worlds, cut levels. Remember how Manglewood's theme seemed jarring? That's because it was originally a swamp world and a Hawaiian world. Not sure which side would have gotten the 50s and which side would have gotten the movie studio, but it makes a lot more sense. Post-game content was gutted, some of it repackaged as a DLC we'll get to later. Alright, quick roundup of some of the worst bugs. Lightning round format. The player could get stuck to objects, causing a new brand of spawn pop cancer, a bug from the first game. Sometimes you'd join a player and be stuck spectating them, unable to spawn in. You could wear Toggle's costume parts on other characters, leading to dubious results. Profile corruption. You could play as custom characters outside of their intended places. Like this superhero guy in the pod, I don't have proof of existing, but why would I lie about that? Creating in the pod was back in full force. Profile corruption. Game diversions galore. Sack pocket wouldn't work sometimes. Soft locking. Infinite loading screens. Profile corruption. Some levels in story mode wouldn't let you progress, and if it happened, you had to delete your save data. Hitboxes could be janked up. You could use big toggle and swoop to lift the player off the pod computer. Profile corruption. Sometimes your poppet would lose all of its items. You could get stuck changing between characters for a concerningly long amount of time. Profile corruption. Profile corruption. Being able to turn in pretty much any material into a skin and vice versa. And enough unreleased content to fill a 10-minute Did You Know gaming video. Hit me up if you want me to voice that, by the way. LittleBigPlanet 3 did not release finished. It was never patched to be finished. But despite the instability, the community persevered. Did they persevere in spite, or because of? It doesn't matter. There were some real bangers. First things first, we had people re-uploading enhanced versions of their LBP2 levels. The two big ones were Angry Whale Survival, re-uploaded because the original had some kind of moderation issue or something, and Survival Soldiers, which had improved visuals. The RPG scene was doing fine, with a new dynamic thermometer allowing for much more visually intricate levels. Some highlights were these eye candy apocalypse levels, and this superpowers level, which unsurprisingly let you play with different iconic superpowers. Speaking of powers, Powers 2 was the sequel to Powers, and is one of the most basic yet fun fighting games I've ever played. Like Flare Island before it, I played so much of this that all my friends kind of stopped wanting to play it. There were these LBP3 versions of the LBP1 story levels, both one-to-one ports and remastered editions. Once again, we saw a lot of recreations of other games, such as Undertale, Prop Hunt Again, Donkey Simulator, which played nothing like Goat Simulator, and FNAF games. FNAF is a franchise we've discussed a few times, and I have my opinions on it, but since LBP3 was released during FNAF's peak, we saw some fancy games. There was Five Nights at the Collector's, a recreation of the first FNAF game that put its own theme on it, and really popped off. FNAF death runs that certainly existed, but also this excellent FNAF Versus level, where one player would be the Night Guard and up to 3 players would be the animatronics. It was really fun, if a little difficult, because you couldn't coordinate without the Night Guards hearing you. There was also an entire movie made in LittleBigPlanet 3, Sackboy and the Seed of Destruction. It has some of the worst voice acting the mid-2010s could offer, a story that feels pretty odd, but is also one of the most impressive things the community has ever created. We also saw fan projects that aim to bring content from the handhelds forwards, like Return to Carnavalia, a project that allows those who lived Vitaless to finally play some of the Vita levels. LBP3 is the only LittleBigPlanet game to still be on its official servers, as all PS3 servers were taken down in 2021 because of something to do with a script kiddie getting upset he got caught. The next statement, for legal reasons, is a joke. I hope you live a life of suffering. I almost forgot to talk about Poppet Puzzles. Poppet Puzzles is a series of levels that tries to turn the basics of LBP into fun, short levels. Taught by Larry Da Vinci for Term 1 and oh, yeah, she's back for Term 2. The main issue I have with Poppet Puzzles is what it teaches. Poppet Puzzles teaches you the very basics, and I think that's kind of bad. Most of the stuff in Term 1 is stuff you'd learn within an hour or two of playing Create Mode. Term 2's a little better, but still pretty bad at this. More crucially, the stuff that's actually decently complicated and confusing is not here. No memorizer, no character tweakers, no dynamic thermometer, none of the stuff that is actually hard to learn. Poppet Puzzles feels like molasses if you're a returning player. But for those new players, these are harmless and self-contained, nothing of particular value. I'd rather listen to my boy Stephen Fry.
When you need two things to stick together.
Where is Stephen Fry? In LittleBigPlanet 3, the voiceover for tutorials is split between Stephen Fry and this random American guy for the new features. I'm sure there was a reason for this, but I don't care. I'm going to complain. Stephen Fry tutorials were full of charm. They were full of wit and little jokes. The Sumo Digital tutorials and their silly American man just lack that humour and wit. My current theory is that these were made so close to the end of development that they couldn't get Stephen Fry to do voiceovers on short notice. That will not stop my rage. DLC is a constant in this franchise. Here we go again. The journey home feels very much like the post-game content repurposed into its own pack. A quick romp through the weddings, the factory of a better tomorrow, and gardens on a quest to make sure all the invites are sent to your own surprise party. It's quite fun playing through these LBP 1 and 2 themes with LBP 3 characters and details, but it's nothing that particularly wows me. Its most valuable asset is giving us more Clive content, for we love Clive in this house. Back to the Future is a franchise with a lot of things, including a character with the last name of Clayton, but it's also a blast. The Back to the Future kit adds in a bunch of stuff, but the only thing of major note is the hoverboard, a new power-up that's basically a hook hat, but you go on top of the rail and it makes you faster. I've always enjoyed it, and that's what really matters. If I told you that the SpongeBob level kit features one of the greatest gameplay mechanics ever added to a Little Big Planet game, would you believe me? The floaty fluid is a placeable, colorable material that essentially functions like water. In other words, it's placeable, shapeable, moldable water. This is a godsend, and you can't buy this pack anymore. Sucks to suck, I suppose. Adventure Time is a very cool show. It got a walkthrough level. Its stylized assets mean I've never gotten mileage out of anything except for the broken TV and skeleton. Do you remember way back when I mentioned English Seaside? Hopefully. This is that remastered for Little Big Planet 3. That's awesome, but I just wish we'd gotten some of this for the other themes. Or I guess one of them. R.I.P. Akihabara District. Remember when I mentioned that Manglewood was originally 2 themes, one of them being Hawaiian? Those assets are reused here. Again, asset reusal isn't a problem in a franchise like this. If it's unused, it's free real estate. But you should have given us more! The content from the cross-controller and prehistoric moves was just turned into free DLC since cross-controller didn't work on PS4 and prehistoric moves was just sitting there, pointlessly. The DLC for Little Big Planet 3 was alright. Nothing particularly of note. I feel like they could have done more, especially since at this point they had so much unused content to play with, but I'm sure they were busy working on fixing the game. Little Big Planet 3 was the final game in the franchise. It released in 2014 and received long-term support for another 3 or 4 years, with its final DLC releasing in 2017? I don't know, it's kinda shaky, but I'm pretty sure it was this Tekken 7 costume kit. The Japanese servers shut down in 2015 alongside the PSP and Karting servers. You already know what happened to PS3 and the Vita servers. And as of today, the only way to interact with UGC LBP content is via LBP3 or hoping someone's re-uploaded it onto private servers. And that was seemingly it. In 2020, while watching a PlayStation stream with some people I'd hesitate to call friends nowadays, we saw this scene of a lion-like character. Instantly, my neurons began to activate because of the fabric-like textures, proportions. Is that a zipper? Little Big Planet 4! Sackboy A Big Adventure is a 3D platformer for the PS4 and PS5. It was very obviously made for the PS4, and then hastily upgraded to run on the PS5 with improved graphics. But it does look pretty good on either. Interesting trend to note, if the game features Little Big Planet in the name, it has a create mode. If it features Sackboy, it doesn't. So, no create mode, whole new gameplay style. How is it? Sackboy A Big Adventure, or as it's abbreviated, SABA, is about Sackboy saving the denizens of Loom, a village and craft world full of the Sackfolk. A lot of new lore we've never seen before, huh? It takes us across Craft World to 5 new locations. The Himalayan Soaring Summit, Amazon rainforest-inspired Colossal Canopy, the underwater pawn shop, the Kingdom of Crablantis, the sci-fi Interstellar Junction, and the center of Craft World, which just seems to reuse a lot of assets from the previous 4 worlds. Oh, and the Wonder Plane, but I kind of forgot to play it. And also, I don't have access to my copy of the game. So, from the little I played, I just remember it being a massive difficulty spike. Story is simple and basic, but this is very much a kid's game. I mean, all of them were, but like, you know, well, I was a child when I played the other ones. In the largest deviation from the formula yet, Sackboy A Big Adventure is a 3D platformer with up to 4-player co-op. You can run, jump, stomp, all of the basic moves of a 3D platformer, including this roll and... Wait a second. This game feels a little familiar. So... It's Super Mario 3D World. You collect these Dreamer Orbs, and once you have enough of them, you can progress. Collectibles mean you can buy cosmetics in Zoom Zoom's store. Of all the characters to survive a reboot, it was Zoom Zoom? There's a variety of power-ups which were reused from cut content from LittleBigPlanet 3, and yeah, Sumo Digital recycled what was cut from LBP3 into a new rebooted continuity, didn't they? The gameplay's got a low skill floor and decently high skill ceiling. It's easy enough for a kid to beat, but hard enough for a master to want to ace. As far as platformers go, it's a solid 8 out of 10, maybe even a 9 out of 10 because of the visuals. I would argue that this is the most charming a LittleBigPlanet game has looked since the first. LittleBigPlanet 3 was good looking, but those rough edges detracted from the charm. Here, we've got a polished game that really tries to re-establish that handcrafted vibe. And it is a vibe, man. There's all this charm and animation quality, it's a visual spectacle. But also the music is a fascinating thing to note. The other games in the franchise would simply use licensed music, but here, they're remixes of licensed songs into this sort of grey area, because, I don't know, YouTube still tell that it's Take On Me when it's in a surf rock remix? Does an orchestral Material Girl still hit the copyright detectors? I don't want to know. It may seem like I'm struggling to talk about this game, and that's probably because the incentive to replay it is much less. With LittleBigPlanet, I felt like I had to 100% every level, so I could have the most materials for Create Mode. In Sackboy, there is no Create Mode. The only real incentive for 100%ing Sackboy is just the Platinum. It's safe to say that my opinion of this game is pretty biased. A reboot of the thing I love, but it's not itself anymore. I was pretty indifferent to the game, but in 2022 I finally sat down and played it on the PS5. I left said copy in another country with the PS5, so I'm writing this section off those memories. The emotion I felt when I played Sackboy A Big Adventure was one of disconnect. I was happy Sackboy hadn't gone the way of other PlayStation mascots, but I also wanted nothing more than for LittleBigPlanet 4, or if that was impossible, a reboot of the franchise. I wanted my 2.5D user-generated content game. Yes, Dreams existed, but... Okay, quick tangent about Dreams so I can explain why it didn't fill the void in my soul. Dreams was a 3D PS4 game centered around giving the player all the tools to make whatever they wanted. You may remember I've already mentioned their 10-year plan gone wrong, so what else was it about the game? Why did it fail? Well, here's my opinion. Dreams was missing two major things that made LBP so fun. Firstly, multiplayer. Dreams is a single-player experience, and while there are some fun levels that are single-player, my fondest memories are playing Prop Hunt, Jeff the Killer, or just goofing around on the moon. The joy of creating is to share with friends. Is Gmod successful because of the sandbox element, or because you can experience those moments with friends? Same goes for Minecraft, and I'd argue the same goes for LittleBigPlanet. LittleBigPlanet wouldn't be as successful without the multiplayer. The other thing is the concept of a skill ceiling, and by proxy, a skill floor. I mentioned this all the way back in LBP1. If you're bad, you can still make something basic. You can't do that in Dreams, man! You gotta sit through a cajillion tutorials to learn the most basic of basics, and I know that you had to do that in the LittleBigPlanet games, but the methods of creating were so simple. Dreams is rocket science, and I'm a little caveman! So, yeah, Dreams doesn't really appeal to me. Sorry. Where was I? When I played Sackboy, I was conflicted. This game is excellent. The visuals, the music, yes, it's got some basic gameplay, but it's really fun to get good at. But at the same time, LittleBigPlanet as a franchise was most likely dead because of this game. Game is charming as hell, yes, but it was the end of a franchise that made me who I am, that gave me some of the friendships I've carried over to today. This game was excellent, but I could never accept it. But as I was playing the final boss, it began to dawn on me. This franchise is a lot like an old friend. You used to be close, but over time you drifted apart. You're not the same person that you were, but who you are now doesn't make those memories less valid. Yeah, you'd probably never be friends now, but the memories from when you were friends, those won't go away. It's corny and stupid, but I can't think of any other way to articulate it. Most of the friends I made on this game didn't switch over to PC when I did. Given the choice of them or the guy who'd introduced me to them, I chose him. LittleBigPlanet had a profound impact on who I was as a person. And while Sackboy: A Big Adventure is a great game, it could just never live up to what had come before. So, that's all of them. What a franchise, huh? LittleBigPlanet was a game about playing levels, getting inspired, and creating levels yourself to share them with a community. It's a franchise I wish I could recommend, but in the end, it just got too big and fell apart. The legacy of this franchise is one that holds a lot of importance to me. It helped make me into the person I am. This is a video I've wanted to make since 2019. I never felt like I'd be ready, and to be honest, I still don't feel ready now. But the closure of the PS3 servers made me finally commit to making this. As LittleBigPlanet turns 15 and LittleBigPlanet 3 approaches 9, it's safe to say we're not getting another LittleBigPlanet. And maybe that's okay. Some franchises won't work as well in the modern day. And despite everything, perhaps people don't need a game like LittleBigPlanet anymore. Besides, with how much licensed content there was in LittleBigPlanet, it probably can't come back without a full reboot. This franchise meant so much to me. And you know what? I'm ready to accept that it's not coming back. Tomorrow. Tomorrow I'll accept that. Actually, I'm busy tomorrow. Maybe the day after that. Oh, actually, I might be busy. So, that's that then? Yeah, sorry for taking this one. You're the review guy, but this was too personal to be talking through a character. Hey, I'm not complaining about a free break. Well, this was supposed to be your last one, but things came up and I had to delay a few of your projects. But you've only got 2 more reviews and then you're done, alright? Oh, thank God, I only had like 3 or 4 more good ideas left. Mod Nation Races, Sea of Thieves, I was going to revisit Minecraft Spore, Portal, and... Oh. Yeah, fair enough, that was more than 3 or 4. Mr. President, a second running-based mobile game has hit the LittleBigPlanet franchise. Yeah, I'm not talking about that one.